Hey everybody, my name is Tribal Instincts, and today is a special day. I get to finally be one of the few that have the honor and privilege of showing off Vertigo for the very first time. If you're on the Vive subreddit, then you are already aware of this game. We've been watching them make this game for the past several months. I think they started before the even Vive actually launched. I'm not sure about that. The very first thing that we saw from them was just pretty much a room with a pit and a beam across it, and you had to walk across it. And I think that's probably where they got the name Vertigo, was because you looked down and you got vertigo, maybe. But anyway, we've been watching this since before it was a game, since before this was anything at all, and I am so excited to be able to show you guys this. I've been working with him for the past week or so, trying to get this video out for you. They actually helped make this stuff around me. The pedestal, the nice Weibo thing. I don't know what this name is. Probably should. But anyway, they sent me over this, and I love it. The sign back there, I'm not going to leave this because I can't in good conscience leave up a sign in my own scene that says Tribal Instincts Rocks, but I want to show it off one time because I appreciate them making it, and then I'm going to take it down. But anyway, this is the review for Vertigo. All right, so Vertigo. Vertigo, to the best of my ability, is described as a action story-driven puzzle game. All right, it's got elements of each of those, and I love the way it starts out because it really gets you going into the entire frame of mind of the game, which is you don't know what's going on. That's pretty much how this game starts. You're in the middle of the woods in this beautiful cabin, which I'd love to vacation there, watching these lights, and suddenly you get sucked into another dimension. Crap. Okay, and what makes it worse is that everything seems to be dead whenever you get there. As it turns out, the reason why you got sucked in there was because this kind of not very responsible company called Planck Interdimensional Energy Solutions has been messing around, and they're opening up wormholes and black holes and horrible gaps in the universe. All right. The first thing that you see is poor Brian stuck in a wall because he used a really nifty teleportation / time slowing gun, and it looks like he got himself into a little bit of an accident. Anyway, his loss, your gain, right? Because you're able to use that to teleport around, and your entire goal of this entire game is to survive and escape. And I absolutely love the biggest shining thing of this is that the story is fun, it's witty, and it's interesting. All right, so you're trying to escape, and there's all sorts of clever voice acting and story points all over the place. Coming from somebody who's played quite a few Vive titles, having a game that is built around an actual interesting story is incredibly refreshing. All right, most games that we play, and by most I mean almost all of them, have been based around one concept: pick up something and shoot something. All right, which I like those games, okay, don't get me wrong, but it's just really nice to take a break and actually play something with an interesting storyline. And they've taken that a step further, and by giving you a feeling of anticipation, not quite dread, but just suspense and just like tightness for what's to come. And they sustain that throughout the entire game. So beyond anything else, fantastic job on giving me a story that I was invested in, and I was really eager to find out what happens. In terms of gameplay, there's really two primary components to the game. One of them is there are a bunch of defense robots that are there supposed to be protecting everybody from the monsters that are invading, which I guess that means that you were from another dimension, so you're an invading body and they're trying to kill you. So that's bad, right? You got mainly two. There's like 3 or 4 different enemy types, but the 2 primary ones is you have the floating balls, like the thing that you see behind me over here, the little tiny one, and then you also have the walking robots with energy swords, and they are very good at dodging and blocking your laser fire. They're very, very reactive. So those are the 2 primary enemies that you face, and then there's a few other ones along the path. Those guys, in addition to other like turrets and other traps throughout it, those provide the core gameplay of just getting around the level. And then there's also everything else, which is the puzzles and the traps and the various components that you have to do to solve each individual level. I'm not going to go into any of the details because I don't want to spoil any of them for you, because really once you do them once, the whole point of this game is to solve these things. So I'm not going to go into any of them in detail, but some of them are involved. Some of them are a bit simple. Some of them I can't say that I'm a huge fan of, but overall, I love what they did. There's a lot of very interesting puzzles with this, and it takes some skill, it takes some memory, and it takes some perseverance in order to get through some of them. Another huge selling point for me on this game is the visuals. All right, now the graphics, they're pleasant, right? They're very simple, they're clean, but they're not trying to go ultra realistic, and I think that's totally okay. VR doesn't need super realistic graphics in order to be like selling. Really, presence is given by being able to interact with objects. As long as things behave the way you want them to, you're sold. Doesn't matter really what it looks like. And on top of that, they add in some amazing depth of the areas. They add in some really cool tricks with the scope and the size of both you and the areas around you. I love what they did with that. All right, in some areas, you are absolutely in awe over how big some of these things are. If you've ever been on like one of the huge like battleships or aircraft carriers, you really get an idea for how small humans are, right? Because compared to these massive things, you feel absolutely insignificant. Same thing with in Vertigo. In some of these areas, in one case, you're in like this big tube, and you see these turbines, and they're zipping around you, and they're just massive, like multiple football lengths worth of scale around you, and you just feel so insignificant. And you're on a zip line going through these things. I love it. They use zip lines in a few different areas. Another area where you have this big room with like poison water something goo in the middle, and you're just zip lining all over the place in order to solve these problems. I love it. I absolutely love the feeling of size and everything that comes with this game. And like I already alluded to, size doesn't necessarily mean in the environment. It also means you. They're able to go through all sorts of interesting ways of manipulating your viewpoint. In another area, you're shrunk down to where you're basically like an ant. You're able to jump and shoot around, and time slows down around you because of it. So very cool. I loved what they did with that as well. It really just makes the game so much more interesting whenever they do things that you can't do in real life. That's the whole point of virtual reality. So I love what they did with that. Fantastic job. In the sound department, they are spot on there as well. All right, remember that feeling of like dread and anticipation I talked about? A huge portion of that was due to these sometimes eerie sound effects and like things falling and monsters roaring in the background. While it wasn't necessarily like in your immediate vicinity, it gave you an aura of just stuff is going on and it's creepy and you don't know what it is. So they did a great job there, and I already spoke to like the voice acting or the voiceovers and stuff. Just overall in the sound area, they did a fantastic job. So much better than what I would expect just a few people in order to contribute towards in such a short amount of time. Fantastic job on that. All right, now while I could sing the praises of this game for a very long time, there are some setbacks to the game. The first and foremost is one of the main things that the game was centered around, which is the puzzles. In some areas, they're a little bit dry and slow-paced. Most of them were good, all right, don't get me wrong, but there are some that you just feel like you need to get through instead of like enjoying the process of getting through them. There's some in particular that feel like more of a game of hide and seek than an actual puzzle. And that's not all bad. It is fun to do some of those things, but there were a few times where I just felt a little bit frustrated and I just wanted to get through it. And so by the time I was done, I didn't feel excited or like I accomplished something. It was just like, oh, that's the answer, and then I moved on. So that is a negative side. I wish that maybe some of the puzzles were a little bit more fine-tuned, maybe went through a little more user testing, and there's a few that I probably would have just like dropped entirely. But for the most part, most of the puzzles are good. Same thing with the boss fights. Most of them are interesting, but with a few setbacks where once you kind of understand how to work it, the challenge kind of goes away. Like the boss fights, the robots that you're fighting on your typical travels throughout the levels, those also have a little bit of, well, once you know how to fight them, there's really no challenge to them anymore. They're pretty easy to defeat once you understand how to get through them. So to that point, while I do like the robots that they have, I think the AI needs to be tweaked more, and I think there needs to be more enemies. Just because once you fight the same enemy 2, 3, 5 dozen times, it's like, oh, there's another one, dang, he's dead, and then you move on. And last point is the game kind of leaves you wanting more. And I don't mean necessarily, or I don't mean exclusively in the sense that you just can't wait for the next thing, which that is part of it, but also the ending doesn't quite feel complete enough to me. The ending is not bad. It is in no way an unenjoyable ending, but it does feel like it ends a bit more abrupt than I would like. So I can't wait for the next installment of the game. From what it looks like, this is leading into an entire series potentially of different games that are centered around this universe, because there are so many options they can do with this. Once you start opening up, holes in space and time, the universe is the limit. But that said, I do wish that this game had maybe a little bit more what feels like completion to it. It does end abruptly, but you know what? For everything else that it has going for it, I enjoyed the entire experience throughout it. Again, it wasn't bad. It wasn't enough. It didn't satisfy me the way that I was really hoping to after everything else that I had been through the game. All right, so where does that leave us? We have an amazing job on the visuals. The storyline, as I said, is absolutely phenomenal. The sound, fantastic. And just overall, the game design is good. In terms of the negatives, we do have some pretty major things to knock off. In terms of, like, one of the core elements is the puzzles, and sometimes they weren't too great, so you kind of lose some points in that. And that feeling of incompleteness, that did bother me a bit. So overall, I can't give this thing like a glowing. If it weren't for the last 2 points that I mentioned, this game would easily probably be a 9 in my book. However, because the puzzles are such a critical piece to it, and because the ending, it didn't feel completely right, I'm probably going to give this thing close to like a 7 out of 10. A few other things added to it, and this thing could easily go up to 8, 9, 10. There are some drawbacks, but overall, I am incredibly pleased with this game, and for $15, it is absolutely well worth it. It probably took me 4 hours to go through it the first time, and now that I've unlocked that, or now that I've beaten the game, I can go back and I can play it on hard mode, where if I get hit one time, I die. I don't know if I have the ability to do that, but it definitely sounds like something that'd be worth trying. All right, guys, that's it. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this, and a absolutely massive thanks to the guys that made the game Vertigo, not only for making the game, but for hooking me up with the assets, the little toys that I have in here. If you're a game dev, send me your stuff. I want to like deck this place out in really cool game swag. So anyway, DM me on Twitter or message me, email me, whatever, if you have something for that. But anyway, guys, thank you again for watching. If you like this, please hit the like button below. And if you didn't like it, hit the downvote button. And don't forget to drop a comment telling me what I can do to make these videos better. And if you want to see more, hit subscribe and the bell icon. And I'll see you all in the next video. Bye-bye.